So welcome to First Parish Church, a Unitarian Universalist welcoming congregation here in the center of Billerica, Massachusetts. My name is Yaakov Reef. You may call me Trek, everyone else does, and it's a little easier than Yaakov. I will be this morning's worship assistant, and I'm a member of the worship committee that helps plan the services at First Parish. Whoever you are on life's journey, whether you're here struggling or here with your best self, you are warmly, enthusiastically affirmed and welcome here this morning. Whether you've been here for many years or attending for the first time, we invite you to join us after the service for coffee, tea, beverages, and snacks downstairs, including allergy-friendly options. This morning's coffee hour is provided by Jim and Brita Learn. Before we get real started, unless you are attending on Zoom even within the sanctuary, I encourage you to take your cell phone and put it on silent or shut it off. I'm actually going to shut mine off. Here it is, power off. I encourage you to do the same. That will help us have a service focused on the sanctity of this space this morning. Does anyone have any announcements before we move into the service? Barbara?
I'm Barbara Maloney. I'm the president of the Board of Trustees, and I'm just going to remind everybody that there is a meeting on Tuesday, the November 10th at 7 o'clock. I mean Thursday, yeah, this says Tuesday, but it is Thursday. November 10th at 7 o'clock, thank you. We meet once a month over Zoom, and you get into that board meeting the same way you come into the Sunday service over Zoom if you want to attend, or if you have any concerns that you'd like brought up before the board, you can tell me during coffee hour, or you can email me at any point.
Thank you. All other announcements can be found in your order of service. There are other announcements in the life of the congregation. We encourage you to take a look, including next Saturday's Gordon Gibb Community Lunch, which will be, we're looking for volunteers. We're also looking for people to come and eat. So we hope you'll join us. That is a meal that is at no cost to you to provide camaraderie and community here in the center of town. Last and not least, we're going to be getting our circle suppers started again soon. If you're interested in that, please come see me or Barbara after the service, and we can get you hooked up with that. Along those lines, if you have a friend at First Parish that you haven't seen here in a while, come see me at coffee hour to grab one of these or a few of these "We Miss You" postcards. I'll be happy to give you a couple of them. Please send them to your friends from First Parish to remind them that we love them and that you'd like to see them here on Sunday morning or one of our other events. First Parish Church in Billerica was founded in 1658 to serve the settlers who arrived here from England to found the town of Billerica. We wish to acknowledge the spiritual and physical connection the Pawtucket peoples of the Wabanaki nations have maintained to their homeland and to the land, water, flora, and fauna here. In this place we call Billerica, and the role which our First Parish Church played in their removal in the founding of this town. We also acknowledge the hardships they continue to endure after the loss of unceded homelands and commit to our responsibility to foster relationships and opportunities that strengthen the well-being of the Indigenous people who carry forward the traditions of their ancestors here and everywhere. This morning, we are welcoming to our pulpit for the first time our new part-time minister, Reverend Steve Wilson. Reverend Wilson is originally from around here. I'll let him explain more about who he is himself, but joins us from most recently of California. So come see him after the service and get to know him as well. I'm going to turn this over to Reverend Steve for the opening words, and then we'll do our chalice lighting together. Reverend Steve?
Well, it's great to be here. Thank you. I grew up in Lexington, so just down the road, still live there, have a lifelong sort of Bostonian resident, lived in California for 5 years, Australia for a year, Chicago for a couple of years, but mostly I keep returning back to this area. It's just absolutely just feels like home. So it's great to be here. Transcendentalism, which is a here movement too, of course, is the brain trust of Emerson and Margaret Fuller and Henry Hedge and Thoreau and Parker, and they're most associated with New England. So I thought it'd be a good way to start here. If I ever were the governor of Massachusetts, I might not have standardized testing in schools, but I would have an admission test for all new residents on this very topic, maybe even the older residents as well. So on this Sunday, you've got on your order of service, there's pens back there, there's a little quiz you can go along with. You probably know the answers, hopefully, maybe if you don't. So the kids who are here will be pleased to know that adults, there's a little bit of Sunday school for adults today too. So there will be a quiz later on. I'm going to read our chalice words, and Trek is going to light our chalice for us. There we go. Kindle us, O light of life. Set us ablaze with the flame that does not consume, that sheds the light of wisdom, that shines with compassion and justice. Let us burn brightly with the unending fire of love. Unitarians have always been about high standards, so we're going to burn brightly with the unending fire of love. As we stand, as you are willing and are able, or stand in spirit, if not in body, and join us in the opening hymn, 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In. 361. I'm going to invite our children forward. I'm going to just introduce the book very briefly, and then we're going to sing them off to Sunday school, essentially, or we don't really call it Sunday school anymore. Please be seated. That song, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, P.T. Barnum was a universalist, and I always like to want to channel him, have sort of a circus quality to the start of the service. A little tough on the organ, but that's the spirit of the start anyway. So I want to invite our kids down for just a second. I'm going to introduce the book, and we're going to sing them out with our parting song. It's 413 in the hymnal if you want to sing along. There we go. So this book that Barbara's going to read with the kids is called The Trouble with Henry. And it's about, come on over here. We're going to head out this way. Or that way, okay.
And the Henry is Henry David Thoreau, who you might be familiar with. And he marauds around Concord, and he basically kind of, he does his own thing. He travels on the beat of his own drummer. He was a traveler. He canoed all over New England, a little bit like our trek. And he was very much about preserving wild spaces. So I'm going to give the book to Barbara, and we're going to sing out our children. With our singing out our children's song, you can take the book. There we go. Thank you. All right. Enjoy.
Our affirmation of faith can be found in your order of service. We will say the words together. Love is the doctrine of this church. The quest of truth is its sacrament, and service is its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge in freedom, to serve humanity in fellowship, to the end that all souls shall grow into harmony with the divine. Thus do we covenant with each other and with God. Please rise in body or in spirit as we sing together hymn number 83, Winds Be Still, our centering hymn. I did forget to mention earlier, you are encouraged to mask while singing, just to help keep things from flowing around the room. Our hymns, all our hymns this morning are in the gray hymnal. So it's number 83, Winds Be Still.
Verse, like, so beautiful. Sometimes you just sing a hymn, me too, just like all of us, just singing along and you hope you're not screwing it up. But like just some of these words, light shine in, illuminate our inward view, help us to see with clarity, shine bright and true so we may join our songs in new sounds that become full symphony. That's beautiful, isn't it? It's beautiful. Let's find this spot with that slow hymn. Let's find a nice still place to be. A few weeks back, I was at a concert, like in all concerts have light shows, and I thought about this church with its beautiful clear glass, and that's lovely, and it's part of our tradition, of course, certainly part of the Emersonian transcendentalist tradition to let the world into the sanctuary. But I thought today it would be cool to imagine there was a multimedia program, and it hasn't been developed yet, but it shows sort of like the kind of connections people feel in church, right? You sort of, you gaze across the room, and if that was all animated in some multimedia program, like a 1960s horror movie, you know, where Godzilla shoots his eye beams at Mothra or something. So imagine the laser beams coming out of all of us to the degree that we all share these sentiments, which are beautiful. Let's bow our heads in this spirit. Maybe for us between compassion for others' needs and compassion for our own. May we initiate a world where the children of the world find love and food, all of them. May those in our world find peace. May those who've experienced the wrath of nature find the courage to piece back together their lives and homes in healthy ways. May we all be healed by the deepest hands and able to pass that around. May we all feel loved and whole. Let's take those deep thoughts and wishes really as a command that we build that world here. And just breathe in the beauty of this space as we prepare for joys and concerns. That's irreverent, John. Mentally paint a picture of yourself in a long, if you're a guy in a long black dignified coat, if you're maybe in a multi-layered dress, if you're a woman, I want you to think a lot of layers in your clothing. I want you to imagine yourself back in Boston and its environs, back in the early 1800s, maybe 1840s, a good time to think about it. The economy was strong. Boston in the early to mid 1800s is the most important city in the country. It is where we got the title of the hub. We've never fully recovered from that. There is in the early 1800s among Bostonians this collective feeling that culture has taken yet one step forward and away from the Dark Ages. There's a certain new buoyancy to humanity. It's kind of a Victorian age sort of Aquarius vibe going on. The standard Christian message that humans are at their core depraved and sinful is starting to feel a little outdated. It feels unnecessarily stiff in comparison to the gains of civil and political revolution. We're not too far from having undone the power of a monarch from overseas, of course. And in this very spirit of better things to come, this very observation that we humans are reaching a higher place. It's that higher place that makes slavery feel so abhorrent. It's that same spirit that gives rise to all the women's equality movements and the desire that we could actually change the way we are. The term evolution from Darwin was not yet a part of the common vernacular, but it was clearer and clearer that humans were thought to be evolving, at least culturally. It's a time, in a way, not unlike ours, with some of the optimism that comes, right, with the best of the changing times. I want you to hold that feeling of the world unfolding in ways that people would not be able to predict. As we hear about the Transcendentalists. Now the sermon. Just hold that feeling, though. I have a girlfriend, old girlfriend from Chicago. She was originally from Baltimore. She lives in San Jose now. And every 3 or 4 months or so, we touch base. And at the end of a conversation, it's been a custom that she'll grab a pen and I will give her, just kind of like our quiz, and I will give her some timely, obscure sports references from Baltimore that she can write down, like phrases that she can use. If it's baseball season, I'll say something. I'll say, tell your dad this. how's, the local Baltimore guy doing? Wasn't he traded to some guy in the Rangers? And she'll have no idea that she would have known this. Or if it's football season, I'll say something like, if the Ravens don't start playing more 3-4 defense, they'll never stop the run. So she writes them down, having no idea what they're all about. Mostly clueless to the statement, she drops them into conversations with her dad, and the three of us have a lot of fun with the whole thing. So today, if you don't know anything about Transcendentalism, and you don't really care to know anything about Transcendentalism, you can drift off, you can stare out the window like Emerson would encourage you to do. And in the same spirit, I will wake you up for a few phrases that you can use at a cocktail party, or to maybe get you out of a worship committee meeting or something. You can use them to impress people, you can use them to make people uncomfortable that you might be a little too highbrow for them, and then you can get out of whatever you want to do. Okay. To understand the Transcendentalists, a big slice of how Unitarian, particularly the Unitarian side of our heritage, got shaped in its relative infancy when we became a church in this country in 1819, 1825. You can start that formally whenever you want. In addition to the feeling we captured in the meditation that the culture was shifting in the early 1800s, the populations of towns in and around Boston had grown enough, this is an important part, that they were contemplating having another church. There was just sort of too many people for the town parish, and there was a little bit too much theological diversity emerging. And those two things pushed forward the theological split with our church and the United Church of Christ, or the Congregational Church, right? Most Congregational churches or Unitarian churches are first parish in the sort of greater Boston area. There was a more formal thought around religion held by the Congregationalists, and there was a little bit more of a new age thought felt by the Unitarians. Everyone was still conventionally Christian, essentially. Channing came up with the idea that we were depraved by nature was wrong. He suggested we are redeemable in large part by the knowledge we accumulate, by the discipline we can incorporate into our own characters, and in the right circumstances, culture can bring to us, right? This was a new way. Churches in and around Boston began to divide over this, and whether Jesus was more mentor than savior. This cultural divide merging around Boston was not unlike the split we face in America, where we have questions about whether we're individuals or we're a community, and where those lines divide. They're different questions, but that same division was there. That tension is the soil that this faith that we stand in was born in. And certainly this pulpit, Emerson's pulpit, was started. Okay, for the dreamers who've been drifting off, you can wake up. Here's our first cool soundbite that might let you know what you're talking about. Here we go. Yeah, I'm a UU, but really I'm more of a Channing Unitarian, old school, achieve your salvation by character Unitarian. Let's practice that, shall we? Yeah, I'm a UU, but really I'm more of a Channing Unitarian, old school, achieve your salvation by your character kind of Unitarian. Okay, moving on. Now imagine yourself about 20 years into this debate, just as the Unitarians and the traditional Christians have sort of broken, probably too soon for the well-being of our institution, along come the Transcendentalists. 20 years or so. Rather than to restrict the popular theological debate about wars over scriptural references, as had been the norm, Transcendentalists like Emerson and Thoreau, Fuller came along to expand the questions being asked. We've never recovered from this initial challenge. It is who we are to a large degree. In this time, establishment Unitarians had just broken from these Pilgrim Brothers, you got to remember, and they literally looked at at Transcendentalists like Emerson and more or less politely said, "Could you just shut up for a little while?" The small group of Transcendentalists met in one another's homes, mostly famously in Emerson's parlor, largely because the meetings took place when Henry Hedge came to town from Maine. I want you to feel what it's like to be a fly on the wall with the crowd that shaped these ideas in Emerson's living room, just 6-7 miles away as the crow flies. Some 175 years ago. Feel free to close your eyes for a second. I won't judge. Bronson Alcott, who's a little eccentric, comes in. He whacks the snow off his boots from the door jamb, and you have your back to him. You are an invisible fly on the wall here. He enters Emerson's house after a long carriage ride out from Boston, where he was starting a school, progressive Montessori kind of thing. Like any of you might walk in and tell each other what so-and-so was up to, Bronson mentions that his daughter, Louisa May, has taken up writing. You want to tell him so badly that she is about to write the absolute classic Little Women, but you can't. You resist. Bronson proceeds to make fun of Thoreau for roughing it down at the lake, all the while going home to get fed and his clothes washed in town with his aunt. And he asks teasingly, "Hey, Henry, who fixed your pant holes? The squirrels?" Margaret Fuller, who is sitting by the fire, looks over her shoulder and welcomes Bronson in. Waiting for the meeting to start, she's flipping through Emerson's notes. He's written in the margins of the German scholar Goethe. It's a book they're all reading. He's a romantic and they're reading a lot of this German scholarship. Being a brilliant woman, Margaret has already finished the book. Being a brash person, she hollers across the room to Emerson that he frequently gets the German interpretation wrong. Everyone is excited today because Theodore Parker is coming, who wasn't there all that often, but he comes today. It's a magical time for us UUs. It probably is the most magical moment we have. Imagining sitting in Emerson's parlor is not unlike being a movie buff and sort of sitting in on a private conversation between George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola and his daughter Sophia, and Martin Scorsese might have if they ever had dinner. Parker, who's one of the 7 students who listened to Emerson's 1838 famed divinity school address when he chastened the Christian church as for being basically too dull and for being entranced by the snowflakes floating down through the window. He is jumping between one of the 7 languages he knew. Parker was one of the staunchest abolitionists there was at a time. One of the most popular preachers of his age. He preached in what is now the Orpheum in Boston. That was an old church, and he preached to as many as 6,000 people on a Sunday. He preached with a gun in the pulpit to resist anyone who would have taken fugitive slaves away. Parker was not to be chastened with. You respect him and fear him a little because you know that tendency of him to be so stern. Parker begins to compare the way that the weather changes from passing clouds to sunshine, particularly here in New England, as the outward and ever-changing shape religion takes, and compares it to the laws of God and the eternal way that a climate works, basically saying that there's a natural religion that undergirds all of these changes. You sit entranced. You want to ask him where he got the commitment to preach nothing of religion that he had not experienced inwardly and made his own. You think that's particularly charming. However, you resist because you're a fly on the wall. Parker's excited, nearly spilling his tea, as he explains his portions that Christianity and Jesus are true and valid only and because they represent the best in us. That's a new idea for you. The degree to which Jesus' life experience corresponds to our deepest values and aspirations of courage and what we see in a human being is why he is a valid savior to Parker, not the other way around. You sit digesting that. Sitting there surrounded by UU greats, you remember reading that philosophically transcendentalist-minded thinkers are part of a long line of idealistic thinkers and philosophers who believe that the ideas in our head, the software, so to speak, was linked eternally and correctly to the rest of the world. We were not an aberration. We were certainly not sinful. In short, the transcendentalists thought that our brains and our souls correspond with the wonder and the beauty of creation, not the depraved nature we've all heard about. It's in part for this reason that Emerson and his crew love nature itself. They see its resonance from our souls out and back. To the transcendentalists you are sharing in this room, humans are built to be in perfect concert with the world. Okay, anyone who's drifted off, our next soundbite might sound something like this. You can write this down too. In keeping with the heritage of my former transcendentalist brothers and sisters, I have a faith that the pleasure I experience at the sight of a beautiful flower is evidence of my own soul and mind's connection with the broader universe. Try that and see if they'll keep asking you to be the treasurer, Jim. They'll think you've been living with Trek too long. Let's step away from this room for a second. Today, the standard assumptions are that we are who we think we are because we've been more culturally informed, and there's a certain lack of wisdom of that exists in the transcendentalist. Today, big thinkers believe how we feel is not rooted in the heavens as much as it's rooted in our neurological creativity. So they do miss some things. But remember, in the 1830s, the ideas that our forefathers and our foremothers put out, that we were sort of miraculously in tune with the universe, stood in such intentional contrast to the orthodox position that we were fallen sinners. Transcendentalists and Unitarians alike flipped the understanding of who we were on its head. We're not sinners who at best be careful of our instincts and nature, not trusting it. It was the other way around. Properly nurtured, we were holy. Being back to one with the earth back then conjured up images of animalistic loss, right? It wasn't the beauty that we sort of see. It wasn't organic veggies being one with the earth. It was one step away from savageness and bestiality. Are you feeling the zeitgeist of that universalism that we were born in? I hope you are. As you sit around the room with these forefathers and foremothers of these giants, you realize that the commitment to our innate sacredness that leads transcendentalists to believe a few things. They believe that our soul, trained on nature and polished by deep abiding values and ideas, would cause people to thrive. And that the principles and values, more than set rules, came to feel closer to what was divine than tradition and scripture did. That there's a deep truth to the information and energy brought by inspiration and intuition. Those are to be valued, not challenged. Parker and Emerson were at all different points called infidels for this back in the land of the 1830s, and sitting under that same oil lamp in that room, you can feel their boldness as radical. When Parker eventually quiets, to your right is Margaret Fuller, and she chimes in. You are sitting next to arguably the most educated woman in the country. Margaret Fuller was arguably the smartest person in the country at this time. She knew 6 languages before she was a teenager. And she starts to tell tales about how she was reared by her loving but demanding father, and recounting the things she learned at sitting at the knee of Channing. Margaret was the editor of The Dial, which was this a publication, the Transcendentalist paper that all of these people generally wrote and submitted to. What she didn't know was that she was going to be the mother to the next generation of the women who would lead the suffragist movement. She was a little bit before that generation of women. She was the first woman to edit a newspaper, and although she was a major newspaper, and although she was not done yet, she would sail off to report on a revolution in Italy as a reporter. Always inspired rather than simply reporting on a conflict, she became a partisan and participant in the revolution. She healed people and kind of was a mother figure in a certain context. She couldn't help but identify with the common people of Italy. Invisible to them, you really want to warn her that she will fall for a passionate revolutionary, have a kid, and eventually die in a shipwreck on their way home. Tragic. But like a wildlife photographer, you can't warn the groundhog that the wolf is coming. Emerson remains behind his desk, sits there listening carefully. He's the most successful of the crew, and he's probably the most lucrative of all the American intellectuals. He's publishing his own books. You can feel the mix of jealousy and envy and love they have for him, the others in the room. He would, in part at the prompting of Thoreau, become a more outspoken advocate for the ending of slavery, and his stop, this house, would be a spot on the Underground Railroad. However, that day has not yet come. Emerson is recounting between bites of cake the difficulty he had the whole year after the death of his first wife, when she was 28 years old, and how he was, this rational Emerson is telling this passionate story about how he was unable to shake the grief, and he felt compelled a year later to visit her tomb after she died and actually have the coffin open to see if she was there. It's a rare moment to see Ralph Waldo so emotional. He's usually a little more austere and revered. Talks about how after his wife's death, he quit the ministry and set off on a freewheeling, lifelong search for understanding. You are so warmed by the energy in this room, this intellectual energy. Thoreau walks in then. He's a little younger and shyer than the rest. He comes in telling about a 40-mile canoe trip he took and apologizes for being late. He's talking about his year living in the cabin, and you bite your tongue at Bronson's slur of him being a little too soft and visiting his aunt for nurturance. He does not know, no one knows that he will become an icon for simple living, inspired Gandhi and King. You want to tell him that he'll soon get in jail for war tax evasion, and you're a little sad that he will die at 44. I'd like to say that you can feel a little romantic tension between Thoreau and Margaret Fuller, but you resist that too. Can you feel the importance these ideas act to who we are today? Maybe your own religious irreverence, impatience, lack of order. Can you see how these ideas make transcendentalists and us today sit here even a little more greedy for knowledge than most religious people are? How they might be fun people to go on a hike with, but maybe a little more erratic at a committee meeting designed to build the infrastructure of the church. Hey, Thoreau, the meeting's inside today. As you use, we're a large part of a commitment to the idea that revelation is continuous and throughout history will evolve what truth is. The Transcendentalists both knew and could not have known that their contribution would fuel endless debates over church authority, which we still struggle with, and facilitate our non-creedal stance that would lead to an openness to humanism and atheism and a return to paganism in our own churches. The edge that the Transcendentalists would walk would eventually lead to an openness to the intellectual shifts that gay marriage are part of who we are. So when you're inclined to stop in your tracks by the beauty of a sunset, or you're stopped to in a minute to remind yourself of how and why you think outside the normal forms, think about the inheritance you get from them. We all walk in the footsteps that step out of Emerson's parlor. Remember that they're all part of our out-of-the-box saints that mix and are called to mix old truths and new truths together in always new ways. Emerson and Thoreau and Fuller compel us to fill our lives with as much exploration and inspiration as we can muster, and pay attention to the shards of revelation that fall our way every day. You are called, new member, old member alike, by these friends seated around the hearth. Hear their call. Amen. It's now time for our collection, our offertory words. And our collection words today come from the very underappreciated minimalist poet John Dillinger, whose words offer this concise piece of practical advice today. Hand it over and no one gets hurt. For these gifts we are grateful. And we are. Okay. Trek is going to extinguish our chalice as I read these words. We're going to put the postlude after, by the way. I made the mistake of orienting the thing. So the postlude's going to follow our closing words and benediction. Elizabeth Selly Jones tells us that we extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth. I think you join me in that. The warmth of community or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Thank you. Our closing hymn is number 6, Just as Long as I Have Breath, number 6 in our hymnal. Oh, yeah. Thanks. It is a tradition in this church to face the world we will soon greet. So please do that. Our closing words come from someone who clearly got the mystical connection to nature the Transcendentalists speak of. A handful of centuries before Thoreau was looking at insects in Walden, St. Francis was stripping off his clothes and talking to the birds. He said this in one of his more sober moments. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. Where there is hatred, let me sow love. Where there is injury, pardon. Where there is doubt, faith. Where there is despair, hope. Where there is darkness, light. And where there is sadness, joy. Amen. Blessed be. Namaste. Shalom. Go in peace.